The first Cantina playset was neither the Cantina nor a playset. The Cantina Adventure set was really just a cardboard backdrop with foot pegs that was supposed to represent the streets of Mos Eisley, and I guess the outside of the Cantina. Probably. Now, it did have some very unique and engaging artwork. As a small child, I would stare at it and wonder about the activity behind the doorway, but I wanted to see what was back there. The set was a Sears catalog exclusive. As much as we associate Star Wars with store exclusives, it's interesting to think that it was going on even in late 1978. It also included 4 action figures: Greedo, Walrus Man, Hammerhead, and the infamous Blue Snaggletooth. Unfortunately, the flimsy nature of the playset meant that it didn't survive most people's childhoods. In 1979, well after all of the legal troubles associated with the Cantina were addressed, see our previous Chapter 7 video, Kenner tried again with the much more successful Creature Cantina playset. Although far from movie accurate, it fit right into the style of the entire Kenner Star Wars line and was much more play-oriented than its predecessor, with clever action features including rubber band-powered opening doors and sliding levers to move the action figures, even to simulate Greedo's, or somebody's, death. Another nice touch was the tiny fine print on the sticker for the doorway that actually says, "No droids." In addition to this, the playset included a colorful backdrop, again with intriguing artwork that you can get lost in. Sure, they took some liberties, but knowing the sparse source material that Lucasfilm shared with them, they probably had to. Here is a brief evolution of this classic playset. The Kenner concept art had the basic idea down for the playset from the beginning, with the doorway on the left, but the bar was to the far right. Notice the Death Star wall pattern, and also that the bar has a drink dispenser. This was a good basic idea, but the backdrop made the Cantina look empty, and it desperately needed some play features. A prototype was constructed, and could be seen in one of the early Kenner pack-in catalogs, under the name Star Wars Cantina Cafe, which sounds ridiculous. Note that the playset design has been flipped, with the doorway now on the right and the bar on the left, complete with a drink dispenser in blue. The Death Star wall deco is still there. The quality of the photo isn't good enough for us to see clearly, but the backdrop now shows some signs of life, and some areas have been added for action figures to stand. A prototype was taken to Toy Fair that year, but slightly different than the one we just saw. The backdrop has been changed again, and it's hard to see, but looks like the drink dispenser has been removed. You've probably seen this photo somewhere, and it contains a lot to look at, including a rocket-firing Boba Fett with 1T, and a prototype action figure set of Chewbacca's family from the holiday special. Here is the spec sheet as shown in Kenner binders, where the playset has been improved even further. The doorway has been moved back to the left side, and a Cantina table has now been added, as well as the famous levers to enable the action figures to move. The biggest difference to the finished product is the floor, which is one large label, which of course was wisely deleted. In the UK, a company called Palitoy had the license to issue Kenner's Star Wars toys, and they were allowed quite a bit of leeway in doing so. For the Cantina, they retained the backdrop artwork and the color of the base, but that was about it. For comparison, here are the parts of the US version of the playset, and here is the Palitoy one, which was completely different in almost every other way. The bar even had a sticker featuring
bar stools.
This may be the earliest example of this fallacy. We will see it again later on. But that wasn't the end for the Creature Cantina. A few years later, Kenner repurposed the design for their failed Real West line, christening it the Real West Western Cafe, and finally getting the word cafe in there. While not exactly a playset, the next company to produce a Cantina was Ertl in one of their AMT model kits. Their Cantina action scene had a floor plan that was based on the one published in the Star Wars Technical Journal, which we saw in Chapter 3. Some liberties had to be taken though, like creating a stage for the band, complete with steps. 21 figurines were included with the model, including both Tonica sisters for the first time anywhere, which probably wasn't even legal at the time. And all you needed to paint them with was your favorite microscope. There was a band of 5 members and also a bartender whose name here was Woober? Could be a typo, but since he was already posed like he was dancing in the holiday special, the whole thing was pretty funny. Galoob's micro machines began with everyday cars and airplanes reduced to tiny size, and were advertised in a famous series of fast-talking commercials that made kids want them. By the mid-1990s, after Star Wars had been added to their fold, a series of transforming playsets was created, where the head and shoulders of a Star Wars character would unfold to reveal a complicatedly engineered playset. The C-3PO/Cantina playset was one of the best examples, with the shiny droid opening to reveal a compact cantina barroom on one side and Docking Bay 94 on the other. While not exactly movie accurate, its design was ingenious and may be the only time a toy manufacturer has portrayed the famous Mos Eisley docking bay, so points for that. Included were figures of Han, Greedo, 2 sandtroopers on one base labeled Stormtroopers, and 3 aliens only referred to by their species, Chadrafan, Duros, and Godel. There were much smaller transforming heads too, pocket-sized versions that included a figure of the featured character, and opened to show a small section of their environment. The Cantina-related mini playsets from this line were Greedo, although the background is a little suspect. I think that's a person at a table, but it could be a waitress carrying a tray. Figrin Dan, whose background makes perfect sense, and a Duros, technically Elor's Medak, whose background is a bar and bartender. Galoob also made a very slightly larger scale called Action Fleet. These figures usually had 3 points of articulation, unlike their Micro Machine cousins, and could actually sit down, which was very useful for vehicles. There were lots of great playsets for this scale too, but they never quite got around to making a Cantina, although there were several Cantina figures made. These were sold in the line's Battle Packs, a carded series of awesomeness that included a handful of figures and sometimes a small vehicle or creature. All in all, there were 14 specific Cantina-themed Action Fleet figures and 3 ancillary ones, making a total of 17 figures, which were available in 6 different Battle Packs. Battle Pack number 3 included a Walrus Man. Wait a second. That's better. He was only available in later versions for some reason, and an awesome Bantha as well. Battle Pack number 4 included Greedo. Battle Pack number 10 included Dr. Evazan, Gurinden, and a Jawa, which of course doesn't have to be a Cantina Jawa, just a Jawa. Battle Pack number 11 gave us Muftak and Figrin Dan. Battle Pack number 12 was completely Cantina themed, titled Cantina Smugglers and Spies, and included Hammerhead, or Momon Nadon, Laxivrak, Arcona, Duros, the Bartender, Labria, Nabrin Leeds, and the typo of Advozek. And finally, Battle Pack number 17 was an Imperial Troops set, which gave you a Sandtrooper that you could use. By 1997, Star Wars had returned to movie theaters everywhere as the Special Editions, with a marketing explosion so big it sent merchandise flying in all directions. Kenner, now going by their parent name of Hasbro, added 3 packs to their Power of the Force action figure line called Cinema Scenes. These were complete dioramas in themselves, which could be opened or displayed in their packaging. 2 3-packs in this line focused on the Cantina. The first, Cantina Showdown, was a Walmart exclusive and only included 1 new figure, the first Dr. Evazan action figure, who didn't even look that good, and retooled versions of Obi-Wan and Ponda Baba. All of this didn't even matter because the display base and the backdrop made the set so desirable and so unique, it was quickly driven up on the secondary market. Here is a better look at the backdrop without all of those figures in the way. The following year, 1998, brought us Cantina Aliens, which included Labria, Nabrin Leeds, and Takil, and not in such dynamic poses this time, making them more useful to collectors. Here is a better look at the backdrop of this 3-pack, which for some reason puts the droid detector in a booth rather than at the Cantina entrance. At last, Hasbro was finally starting to make some aliens, but it began to dawn on fans, where was the Cantina? The answer came later that year, but not in a way that anyone expected. The Cantina at Mos Eisley was a 3D diorama that was first offered through the fan club as an exclusive and then, unusually, sold in retail stores as well. Named the Pop-Up Cantina by fans, it featured a cleverly engineered design that started out completely flat and opened up to reveal a 2-foot wide playset. It sold so well, a 3D Jabba's throne room soon followed. But was it good? Well, it wasn't very accurate. Unfortunately, the thin cardstock couldn't hold up to multiple assembling and reassembling, or especially rigorous play. It also tended to warp and never displayed completely straight. Also, Hasbro, known for their confusing mistakes, made some confusing mistakes. The most glaring one was this, besides looking more like a Mexican restaurant than the movie Cantina. The inclusion of a pack-in exclusive action figure meant that completists would not skip this playset, and instead of the logical choice of a desperately needed bartender figure, we got a repaint of a recent Sand Trooper figure. Also, a few inexpensive accessories such as movable sculpted seats and tables, as well as glasses or cups, would have gone a long way. Despite all of this, for several years afterward, it was a common sight to see many a photo of this playset on forums and websites, dusty and crammed full of people's Cantina action figures, trying to make it work. In short, it was all we had. In 2002, another series of Cantina figures with a partial environment was announced, which would be Walmart exclusives. The good news was, they would include sculpted sections of the Cantina bar and even some drinking glasses. The bad news, though, quickly overwhelmed the good. The figures were all repacks, or slightly retooled versions, of Greedo, Hammerhead, and Walrus Man. Even though a bartender figure had been made the year before, the backdrop painting still included him, making it ridiculous to try and put, that figure behind the actual bar. Worst of all were the bar segments themselves. They were all straight with no curved ends and actually included, wait for it, bar stools. Yes, friends, Hasbro, for a series of action figures that, overwhelmingly up to that point, did not even have bendable knees, put bar stools in the Cantina, which didn't even belong there to begin with. As a side note, Hasbro did issue the 2 curved ends of the bar years later, but fans didn't know how we were supposed to use them. Some actually cut the bar out of their pop-up cantinas, but because of the bar stools, just made a bad thing even worse. This series of figures failed so hard, Walmart refused any future ones, which were canceled. This was unfortunate because the second wave would have included some new and improved figures. Hasbro repurposed these into some Kmart 3-packs instead. Let's move away from Hasbro for a moment and instead go to the world's largest toy company, Lego. As you probably know, Lego acquired the Star Wars license in 1999, and hundreds of sets have followed since then. Their first attempt at a Cantina came in 2004 with set 4501 Mos Eisley Cantina, released shortly before minifigures were converted to flesh tones. This 193-piece set was much smaller than it needed to be, and included a remake of Luke's Landspeeder, a dewback, the booth and table where Greedo confronts Han, and 5 minifigures. As paltry as it was, it would be another 10 full years before Lego would return to the Cantina. In August of 2014 came set 75052, also called Mos Eisley Cantina. At 616 pieces, it included 8 minifigures, including new ones like the Bith Musician ×3. However, the piece count was hampered by a new dewback and yet another Landspeeder, which were unnecessary. In the end, this Cantina was half the size it should have been. But the best thing about Lego is, if you don't like it, you can always rebuild it, which is exactly what many fans did, including this author, who doubled it with the second set and even customized a few missing aliens. In 2018, hopes were dashed yet again when set 75205 was released at 376 pieces. With an entryway, 1 booth, and again half a bar, the set was a disappointment. But not entirely, as after 3 tries, Lego finally gave us a bartender figure, as well as a nice-looking Ubrikian speeder to park outside the door. It seemed like the collector had to combine and duplicate elements from each of Lego's attempts in order to make a passable, somewhat complete Cantina. Until 2020 will be remembered as a banner year of suck, but that fall, set 75290 was unveiled. At 3,187 pieces and 21 minifigures, this Master Builder set provided the full-sized Cantina that fans had been waiting for. 6 alcoves provide plenty of seating, and outside, additional buildings, 2 evaporators, and a new speeder help flesh out the Mos Eisley streets. The set was a huge home run for LEGO, but not without some oversights. First, 2 important parts of the barroom were completely forgotten: the iconic red and blue stripes that run around the entire inside of the cantina, which were present in all of the earlier attempts, and the canopy above the bar, which the drink dispenser framework should connect to. Also, LEGO can't seem to nail down which alcove should be Han Solo's, and they have him on the wrong side. Still though, this set was a winner for me. If LEGO would only find a way to give us a couple more battle packs worth of aliens to help populate it, I'd come and mow their lawn for a year. Returning to Hasbro, the Galactic Heroes line began as a repurposing of an earlier Playskool series that aimed at the demographic of the very young Star Wars fan. Converting Star Wars characters to squatty, chunky, and even cute versions of themselves, the line expanded between the years of 2004 to 2010 to include vehicles large and small, creatures, and boxed dioramas complete with cardboard environments. These large diorama-like multi-packs, also named cinema scenes, were often store exclusives, and in 2007, Walmart carried 2 semicircular dioramas, Cantina Band and Cantina Encounter, that connected together to form the barroom. There were 19 figures between the 2 playsets, with the Band playset even featuring built-in electronics beneath the cardboard stage, enabling the modal nodes to play their famous song. Hasbro's Black Series, the 6-inch action figure line which began in 2013, is actually very behind when it comes to Cantina characters. Besides the main characters, a Jawa and Sand Troopers, we've only gotten Greedo, Dr. Evazan, Ponda Baba, and the Cantina Band, with Hammerhead on the way. As for environments, you could get cardboard chairs and a table in the Cantina Showdown Rehash Multi-Pack, which was a Toys R Us exclusive. 2021 gave us a new Cantina Showdown, which was a Hasbro PulseCon exclusive, based on the 1997 Power of the Force 3-pack we looked at earlier. This box set included a Cantina bar and drink dispenser. Well, half of each, as it turns out. Yes, Hasbro actually expected fans to purchase 2 sets apiece, when the limit was 1, in order to have enough segments to make the entire bar and scaled down drink dispenser in the middle. It didn't help that many of their publicity photos they published utilized more parts than actually came with the set. You had to read the fine print. It remains to be seen whether these parts will ever be reissued, maybe even as a complete bar. Either way, we will need many more aliens to populate it. But it's not all bad news. Lots of collectors tend to be very critical of Hasbro, and as you can tell, I don't hold back either. But when they do something right, and especially give the fans what they want in the process, we should give them credit. Lastly, we finished with the newest Cantina playset of all, which should turn out to be the most accurate and the most complete ever. You'd have to be under a rock lately to not know that the crowd-funded Haslab Mos Eisley Cantina has been successfully backed, and even surpassed its minimum goal to unlock the next 2 tiers of funding, meaning that purchasers will receive even more action figures. As a footnote to chapters 5 and 6, we can now add vintage collection figures in 2025 for the Bartender, the Tanaka Sisters for the first time ever, another Greedo, as well as a new super articulated Neighborin Leeds. Unfortunately, it will be close to a year and a half before anyone has the actual playset to show off, so for now all we have are the Hasbro CGI renders, but they are exciting. An unfortunate side effect to this playset succeeding is prices for action figures of Cantina aliens have been skyrocketing. In a way, it's understandable though. The Power of the Force 2 line turns 30 next year, hard to believe, and modern Star Wars figures are now older than some of the people collecting them. Not everyone has been able to follow Hasbro's output religiously, which is what it will take to populate this amazing cantina. There are many characters they have only made once, and some even that the collector will need multiples of. Fans are left hoping that Hasbro finds a way to address this. It's going to be interesting to see the first videos that are posted when this playset finally arrives, and to see how collectors display and populate their cantinas. One of the first things we will have to do is figure out a good way to make a floor. I wish Hasbro had given us some sort of mat, but I'm sure collectors will come up with something that will work. Let me know in the comments what you plan to do. Next time, hide your kids, hide your wives. It's the divider of fans and the bane of George Lucas's existence. The infamous, the dreaded, the Star Wars Holiday Special. Don't miss this one, but remember, you have been warned.